Hello, hello. We'll give ourselves traditional 2 minutes, so anyone who wants will have time to appear, but not more. The webinar is recorded anyway, so if anyone will want to catch up with what was at the beginning, they will have a chance. I see the attendees are still appearing. Let's wait for a moment. I see a couple of familiar names. Hi, hello. I hope you all can hear me okay. We've tested this beforehand, so there should be no trouble. We have a nice little subject for you today prepared. Okay, we are 2 minutes in. There's quite a handful of people here. So, hello everyone, and I think we'll just get started. Welcome to the webinar. So, if you are still at the stage of learning what passwordless actually is, well, I recommend watching the previous webinars first, especially 1 and 2, which are linked here in the slide, because today's session will be a little bit different. I will not be spending time explaining what passwordless is or why is it useful. This webinar is for teams that have already decided to go passwordless and are now asking harder questions, how to do it properly in an enterprise environment. During this webinar, I want to talk about passwordless, but without a typical sales pitch. Instead, I will focus on real deployment scenarios and authentication architectures. I look how passwordless is actually deployed in large organizations and not how it's drawn on a sales slide. You can expect a comparison of different approaches, their technical consequences, and the trade-offs you should be aware of before committing to a specific path. While I hope to have some answers to the questions you might already have, I actually expect you will leave this webinar with even more questions. But those will be the useful type of questions, the ones that will help you pick the approach that suits your needs the most. My name is Bartek. I'm a solution architect at Sequence, where I specialize in passwordless authentication. I have a background in networking, in security, but also I have my share of experience with project management. And off the clock, I like sailing. So enough about me. Let's get to the webinar. Many presentations about passwordless focus around its benefits. I do assume you are already well aware of the benefits of passwordless authentication, so I'll focus on real-life risks and approaches during implementation. Those considerations do not usually appear in product demos, and as such, are actually far more interesting, at least in my humble opinion. Passwordless is often presented in a confined environment, on a single application, with a modern front end and full control over the backend. A clean end-to-end authentication flow. Enterprise environments operate under different conditions. They typically consist of dozens of applications, combining legacy systems, vendor-owned platforms, and systems governed by the strict no-touch policies. Under these conditions, implementation complexity becomes the dominant factor. This is where the distinction between a presentation level concept and deployable enterprise architecture becomes visible. In real enterprise environments, the identity landscape is heterogeneous and was not really designed with the passwordless in mind. Identity can be shared across systems. Applications originate from different technology eras. Every change requires testing, risk assessment, audit reviews, alignments with policies. I can go on with that list. So the question is how to introduce passwordless into an existing environment without breaking what already works. Where do we attach passwordless? This is basically where we start and what I will be addressing during this webinar. Each deployment addresses the answer to this question a little bit differently. Some approaches require code changes, some rely on modifications of the identity layer, while others are implemented on the infrastructure level. And each approach comes with different constraints and consequences. I'll keep on asking some more practical questions that typically determine success or failure in enterprise environments. Questions like how much change is required, how complex is long-term maintenance, will this approach pass audit and compliance reviews, or perhaps can users be migrated gradually without disruption. Common passwordless deployment models are typically consist of these that are visible on this slide. This is a list of architectural patterns that appear across different products and vendors. So let me break those a little bit one by one. Native WebAuthn is obviously when you code in the API into your applications. Gateway-based authentication introduce some intermediate login screen, intermediate layer between the application and the user. Logical layer. LDAP proxy comes in between the application and the IAM, so it interferes with the authentication process itself on an LDAP Active Directory level. Agent-based solutions requires installation of some sort of agent either on the backend or on the user endpoints themselves, and the reverse proxy comes with some sort of infrastructural layer in front of the application, which processes the traffic before it reaches the protected applications themselves. So regarding native WebAuth, this is the most straightforward model, and implementing this WebAuth directly and implements the WebAuthn directly in the application logic. It's a valid and very often the most optimal approach when you have a full code ownership and freedom to design the authentication flows from the start, along with obviously with the resources to achieve this. Native WebAuthn in applications comes with some pros and cons, obviously. At the scale, this model starts to expose some limitations. Each application becomes its own implementation, so with a separate development, separate testing, separate documentation, and maintenance procedures. And in this kind of implementations, migrations usually become binary. So an on-off switch is full of user. Either all of the users of particular applications migrate or none of them do. And the migration costs vary. And actually they do vary from predictable when you have your own in-house development team to basically unpredictable when third-party vendors or outsourced development teams are involved. Gateway-based models. Gateways seem like a natural choice for security and IAM teams. They do come with some sort of centralized policy enforcement, integrate quite easily with existing identity infrastructure, and often allow extension into privileged access management area. However, they do not automatically mean zero application changes, as those are often required, and gateway projects can drift into the previous area when full-scale development was involved. Gateways impose structure on identity, but they typically expect applications to adapt to them, not the other way around. And this becomes problematic in legacy environments where adapting the applications to fit the gateway is often unfeasible. Moving on, LDAP proxy. This model extends modern authentication to legacy systems by preserving the LDAP interface that is already expected by applications. From the application perspective, authentications remains a standard LDAP flow. The limitation of this model actually comes with scope. This approach works well in environments where LDAP is the dominant authentication mechanism. In more heterogeneous environments, its limitations become apparent. Also, the not so obvious drawback is that LDAP proxies not very often allow you to go full passwordless with the best phishing-resistant FIDO2 authentications. This can either be very challenging or not possible at all. Agent-based solutions. Agent-based models do provide very deep control over authentication by operating close to the workload or close to the endpoint. That control comes with some operational implications. Each agent introduces a life cycle that includes deployments, upgrade, compatibility management, and ongoing security maintenance. And the key consideration regarding agent-based deployment is ownership over time. You need to answer the question, who will be responsible for this operational overhead, upgrading and securing the agents in, let's say, 3 to 5 years. So this is kind of important. When it comes to reverse proxy model, you have a shift of integration point from inside the authentication flow to in front of the applications. And this system allows authentication and access control to be enforced without modifying the protected systems, while still providing centralized control over the access policies. It's a very effective model in environments where applications cannot be modified. But it comes with the drawback of the necessity of introducing infrastructure considerations. So there would be another element added within your infrastructure that would have to be maintained and operated. However, it offers the highest level of flexibility, especially when dealing with heterogeneous application landscape. Here's a small table that compares these approaches, and let's pause here for a second, because this is actually where the real decisions are made. And this table is where the correct questions should start popping into the mind of the architect. And I want to ask some questions that actually popped in my head when I was designing this webinar. So starting with, where are the integration points? Each deployment introduces a passwordless at a different level. It can be either application level, identity, protocol, or infrastructure. And these layers do determine the scope and the risk and the expected cost of passwordless initiative. In practice, the integration point is far more important than the authentication method itself. You should count real categories of the applications, like web applications, legacy apps, vendor managed applications, fake clients, internal tools, and ask yourself whether all of these can support protocol changes or can be safely modified. You have to think and answer the question that if you had to enable passwordless just for the, let's say, top 10 of your applications, how many of those could you realistically change? Very important question, if not the most important, because the answer to it often limits the options you have immediately. Internal development teams, if they own the code, well, this actually means that native web app N may be possible. If you are operating only on vendor products, well, quite often the changes are impossible. Outsource development is a sort of a mix of two words, but it can increase both the cost and the time of such project quite a lot. Architecture choices do narrow down the moment you realize you don't really control the code of your applications. Real organizations require pilots, require test groups, early adopters, friend and family testings, risk-based prioritization. So once this is figured out, you can also start consider the answer to the question whether you can actually afford to secure only part of the user base or part of the application base during such migration. So that's also very important. Uh, You're probably aware that architect mindset and the audit mindset are completely different, right? So probably during or after your project, you will be asked questions. Questions like, where is the authentication enforced? Where are policies defined? Is the logging centralized? Remember that if you consider distributed applications, so distributed applications mean distributed audit challenges, and you have to keep them somehow all connected and well controlled. Who will maintain the implementation? Each of the models you might be considering shifts the maintenance responsibility to different team. And what matters is which of this team can realistically own the solution long term. Where are policies enforced? Do you enforce the policies per application? Do you enforce them at a central control point, or do you want to enforce them per user or group of users? The more fragmented the policy model is, the higher the operational overhead, especially when you are having some complex user populations. Rollback strategies, scalability, modernization paths also become relevant at this particular stage. This is why choosing passwordless implementation is not really a feature decision, right? It is an architectural decision. Unfortunately, I know I've gave you quite a lot of questions, but from where I sit, I'm not in the position to answer those for you. And this is intentional to this webinar. It is designed to make you think about these solutions, because organizations are different. They're significantly different in architecture, in risk appetite, in legacy footprint or ownership models. And because of that, I personally do not believe in a single universal passwordless deployment approach. What is feasible depends far more on what you are starting with than on what a vendor demo can show you. What I can do, however, is explain how we at Sequence approach passwordless and MFA projects and why we designed our architecture the way we did. So, our starting assumption is quite simple. Most enterprise applications cannot be changed. Either you don't own the code, or vendors prohibit the changes of the code, or let's say the risk of changes to the application is way too high. That's why our approach is fundamentally no code. And we achieve it by operating on a reverse proxy model. So the last of the deployments I showed you during the deployment consideration part. We also use existing SSO protocols by positioning ourselves as identity provider within the scope of these protocols or perform some sort of protocol translation. Put simply, uh, if enabling passwordless requires touching application logic, templates, or SDKs, we treat it as a deployment risk, not a feature. And the no-code approach leads directly to the second principle. Protected applications remain unchanged. Applications are not required, to become passwordless aware or something like that. We do take the responsibility for that complexity and we put it outside of the application. And we recognize that enterprises and environments are very rarely homogeneous. You typically own a mix of legacy and modern systems. You have on-premise and software as a service platforms, and most probably you are working with multiple identity stacks. Our goal is to connect these architectural islands using a centralized MFA and passwordless model. Yeah. At the core, Sequence is a FIDO2-centric company. But at the same time, we recognize that FIDO2 can also act as a multi-factor authentication. That FIDO2 can work alongside your existing authentication, or perhaps, if you wish, fully replace passwords either instantly or over time. The key principle we work with is choice, especially around migration choices and migration speed. I've mentioned audit. So from an operations and compliance perspective, everything should be centralized. In our solutions, policies are defined once. Enforcement is consistent and audit logs are collected in a single place. And this kind of approach reduces the audit complexity, operational overhead. Security teams don't have to manage policy drift and changes, don't require redeploying applications. Why this adapts over environments? Before I answer that, I still stand by the statement that there is no single universal solution. And I'm not trying to tell you that our solution is universal. But what I described is an approach that is adaptive and can adapt to many applications, many authentication styles, many migration speeds, or perhaps many regulatory complex. Not because it enforces a single deployment model, but because it minimizes assumptions. We don't make assumptions about your environment, and we adapt ourselves to what we encounter there. So when you take a look back at the architectural questions that we discussed earlier, the goal really is not to find the perfect, most suitable answers. The goal is to choose an approach that works with what you already have, that lets you avoid irreversible decisions and allows you to evolve towards passwordless at your own pace. If there is one thing, one sentence or one notion I would like you to leave this webinar with is that passwordless is not a feature deployment, and not by far not a feature deployment. It's an architectural program and a huge architectural decision. And thank you for your attention. And I would like to answer some questions if you have any. Let me take a look. Okay, so I have a couple of questions also from some are similar to what I've experienced so far during the deployment. So let me just read them out because as far as I know, you don't see the questions asked in the webinar. So how does this work with our existing Active Directory or LDAP if we do not want to change anything there. Well, the solution you choose for a passwordless deployment, as I mentioned, should adapt to what you have. Active Directory is a great place to start because it offers very useful entry points. LDAP obviously allows you to decide on LDAP proxy for a solution. But there are protocols like Kerberos that already equip you with single sign-on and can be a good place to inject some protocol translation and interject passwordless authentication. There are plenty of solutions that can work here, and obviously with Microsoft-based solution, you have some more flexibility and some more vendor products you can work with. Can we introduce passwordless only for selected users first? For example, administrators without changing the whole system. This is also a very important approach. And yes, but however, not all of the architectural choices I've described today allow this. For example, native WebAuthn usually allows for a very binary migration. So either everyone or none at all, of course, in the scope of the protected application. Our approach works with opt-in lists, which let you define which users you want to involve in the project from the beginning and let you design sort of a friends and family testing just for a very selected groups of users. So you migrate at your own pace. And yes, we are designed to do so. That's a very good question. Who usually maintains the solution? Because there are choices, IAM teams, infrastructure teams, security teams. Well, for the architecture design, that's really a choice based on your preference. Probably native WebAuthn will be maintained by development teams as they are the one responsible, while some sort of gateway approaches are more in scope of infrastructure or security teams. Our solution is usually handed over to IAM people, as this is an appliance that is very easily configurable. However, the appliance itself and the system works can be maintained by infrastructure teams. I lost my team. Can you talk about decisions that needed to be made on how where the passwordless keys are stored and its usability? On user device, corporate devices, etc. What were some of the challenges? That's also very good questions. Not a particular architecture one, but very important from the security compliance perspective. Some background, FIDO2 allows you to store the private keys, well, or YubiKeys or any other crypto keys that are FIDO2 compatible. It allows you to use your mobile phones as an authenticator, platforms like Windows Hello, Apple ID, or even software, Bitword and KeePass, 1Password. All of those can be used as an authenticator and can store the public key, and that's the private key. Sorry, the private key is the private part of the passkey. However, how the passkey is stored is very important because most of the platform authenticators, especially mobile ones, do send the private key to vendor cloud. And even though from the standard security point of view, this is not a big drawback, though the trust that you can have with the vendor cloud obviously is different based on your, I like to call it paranoia level, but paranoia in this good security-centric point of view. Also, storing private keys in cloud can be a huge compliance problem. And many corporations, many environments we work with actually disallow this kind of use. So what we do? There are a couple of approaches. One of those is key attestation. This way, you can, by design, by the application choice, you can limit the type of authenticator you allow to use in your environment. So you can only allow crypto keys, for example, which are obviously the safest form of storing a passkey. It has some drawbacks because by limiting the authenticators, you limit the options. And not all of those options are insecure. There are third-party authenticators that offer a very good compromise between security and usability. And at Sequence, we actually offer one of those because we have our own passkey manager, third-party authenticator, which offers the usability of a mobile passkey, which is usually synced, but does not send out the private key to any cloud and stores it on the device secure element. So it's a sort of best of two worlds. You can combine device-bound passkeys with synced passkeys, with the, let's say, usability of synced passkeys by having them all stored on the device owned by user. This requires, obviously, installation of an application on your phone. Those two options, crypto keys and what we like to call mobile-bound passkeys, I think are the best choice for regulated environments and well, give the best compromise between the security, which is still on a very high level, and usability, which is also very necessary as one of the key ideas when passkeys come in mind. One last question I have here. Can we introduce passwordless without changing our current password reset or account recovery process? Yes, also with some of the of those deployment times, especially with the one that we provide, and for this one I can really vouch. Here at Sequence, what we do, and I will focus on this deployment at the reverse proxy level, we can actually introduce passwordless in full. So the passwords you already have established, all the credentials you already have established in your organization can remain unchanged. And the passwordless flows can work alongside your existing authentication. A notable example would be our recent deployment in bank, where we offered passwordless solution alongside existing authentication procedures the bank already have. And we, again, using the power of reverse proxy, managed to accomplish that with no changes to the bank's infrastructure. So basically with our appliance and free rules on the load balancer. So existing password flows, including resets and recovery processes, can be untouched and can work alongside passwordless solutions. Choices like LDAP proxy can make that a little bit more difficult because they do interfere with actual authentication flow, while architectures based, let's say, on gateway deployments can also easily work alongside your existing credential management systems. Okay, that's where the questions I already have. I don't see any more appearing. If you have any questions, a good moment to type them in the proper space on the webinar screen. If not, thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your attention. And if you do have any questions, if you want to just talk passwordless, feel free to reach out. You have email addresses here on the screen. You can find me on LinkedIn. And I hope to hear from you, your feedback. And if you have any questions regarding FIDO2, regarding passwordless, regarding our own Sequence approach to deployments, I'm happy to have a conversation. I see one more open question. How about self-service of Passkeys? Also, that's answer and the approach to self-service is also very much dependent on the architecture you choose. When it comes to Passkeys, and any other FIDO-based authentication tools that started with FIDO U2F, which was constrained to the security keys I've talked earlier. Backup is very important. FIDO 2, I will get to the self-service in a moment. Trust me, I just want to build up attention. Losing your authenticator can be very problematic because in such cases, when you have a phishing-proof method of authentication, opening a self-service recovery of lost authenticators might lead to opening new attack layers, attack vectors based on phishing mostly. So you can always be manipulated to start such process and in some way or another hand it over to attacker, resulting in losing your account. In sequence, we typically don't allow self-service recovery unless it is based on channels that we trust. We have a mechanism that allows to feed our systems with trusted data, like trusted emails or trusted phone numbers, and use those for self-recovery process. But this has to be done on an administrator level. So for large user bases, say customer user bases, or those that are based on self-service registration, this probably won't be viable. But for your internal identification needs, when you are aware what your user base is, you can safely and securely import the contact data that could be used for service, then yes, we can easily provide our approach to self passkey reset and subsequent self-registration. But yeah, again, only if we trust the communication mean. Okay, I see no more questions. We are 40 minutes in, so again, please help yourself to our reports about passwordless, about passkeys, and about regulations that can convince you to go passwordless, probably. And again, thank you for attendance and hope to hear from you on other platforms. Thank you and bye-bye. Antek.